With Future Redeemed out now, Xenoblade 3 story is complete. But I've seen a lot of people still have a lot of questions remaining regarding the timeline of events as well as how the origin stuff works. So in this video I want to break down the timeline of events that lead to Xenoblade 3 as well as answer specific questions that you might still have about plot points as well as I can. Because the game leaves us many questions that can be answered if you take a look at the greater story told throughout all Xenoblade games. So obviously this video will contain spoilers for all Xenoblade games, and I will also touch on Xenosaga stuff that I don't consider spoilers. And before we jump into this video, just a quick reminder that this is a very new and small channel and I appreciate every single comment and like as well as subscription. Thank you very much. To fully understand Future Redeemed and its ending, I need to cover the events prior to Xenoblade 3. Even if you are confident knowing mostly everything about what happened in Klaus's world, I still recommend that you get this refresher because it also includes new Future Redeemed info. But if you just want to know about the Xenoblade 3 events, skip to the origin chapter ahead. Our story starts on planet Earth as we know it today. Sometime during the beginning of the 21st century, a strange magnetic abnormal matter was found in Africa. This is later to be known as the Conduit/Zohar. The strange object was a perpetual motion machine that defied the laws of energy. It is described as a meta-universe manifold that basically acts as a gateway, connecting multiple universes. Multiple universes coexist side by side, not knowing of each other's existence. If we dig deeper into Zohar/Xenosaga lore, we know that the universe Xenoblade plays in consists of multiple layers or domains, such as the lower and upper domain. You can think of it as like a higher power, a realm that mortals from the lower domain can't comprehend. This is basically how we get this limitless energy and power from that we can't explain. The Conduit/Zohar links to this realm and leaks energy to our world. The coalition government formed a research institution named Aoidos to further study this object, but because the strange magnetic abnormalities caused problems on the surface, they built 3 orbital space station elevators around the equator, connecting with each other through an orbital ring. The other 2 space stations were called Aecus and Minos, but the conduit was placed and researched at Rhadamanthus. This is where 2 researchers named Klaus and Galea were working under Aoidos to study the conduit. The government also constructed an artificial intelligence collective known as the Trinity processor to help maintain the conduit. This biocomputer was raised in a virtual reality to gain personality and be able to handle maintenance even without human interference. The government also started making spaceships that allowed faster than light speed travel and sent millions of peoples into the space under the codename Earth-Life Colonization Project Exodus. It was during this time that another rebel faction known as the Saviorites were formed. I put rebel in quotes because they actually fought for a human rights protection bill that the coalition government proposed against. Basically, the government was on top of the world, they had limitless energy with the conduit, and of course even built deadly weapons to protect it, such as the Artificers and Ion. What exactly happens now after this is unclear to us. In the case of Xenoblade X's connections, I went over the fact that the coalition government lied about almost everything concerning Project Exodus. If at least something X told us was not a lie, then it was during the mid-2020s when Elma first arrived on Earth as well. But because after this part everything would be a theory and not directly confirmed to us, I will not dive any deeper into Xenoblade X stuff for now. What we in fact do know is that the Saviorite rebels started attacking the coalition government, demanding them to hand over the conduit, and a war broke out. It was at this point that the researcher named Klaus started the experiment that would start the whole Xenoblade series. We don't know exactly why he pressed the button and started the experiment, but in his words he explains that he lost hope for mankind and was praying that the experiment would change the world to a better place. But by opening the forbidden gate, the conduit actually covered the entire planet and split it into 2 different dimensions. The original Earth disappeared from our universe, making it seem like it was destroyed completely. The two halves now coexisted in different dimensions, and the only link remaining between them was the conduit and each half of Klaus, because the experiment split him between the two worlds. The same could have happened to Galea, but it's not 100% confirmed. In the Xenoblade 2 world, only half of Klaus and a few survivors remained. The grand city that we know from Future Redeemed turned into a horrific sight later to be known as Moritha. Klaus, broken and devastated from the outcome of his experiment, wished for oblivion, but because his other half was living in a different dimension, he couldn't die by himself. He saw it as divine punishment, and to atone for his sin, he started making the Cloud Sea that can dissolve matter and started recreating life through core crystals. Basically, he took it upon him to recreate civilization from the start. This would take thousands and thousands of years. Then Torna happened, and 500 years later Xenoblade 2 happened, where the other two Trinity processors, Numa and Logos, resided. Meanwhile, in the Xenoblade 1 world, the other half of Klaus and Galea remained. Sometime after the experiment, one of the Trinity core processors, Ontos, would trigger a space-time transition event and appear in the Xenoblade 1 world. There, Klaus would use Ontos' power to create a new universe together with Galea. Klaus and Galea would become known as Zanza and Maineth, building the Bionis and the Mechonis. We know Zanza destroyed and recreated the universe multiple times until the main game of Xenoblade 1 takes place. And also we know for a fact that both endings of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 play at the same time, so Bionis would also have existed for thousands of years. Without completely retelling how Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 went, Klaus/Zanza was defeated on Bionis, allowing Klaus from Alrest to also disappear. With him, the conduit seemingly also disappeared. In Alrest, Rex and Co. defeated Logos and now had Pyra and Mithra acting alone as the Numa processor, while on Bionis, Shulk wished for a world without gods, which put Alvis back into his core crystal form, Ontos, only to be found by Shulk after Future Connected. This whole backstory is important to understand what happens now in Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed. Basically now, after thousands and thousands of years after Klaus pressed the button for the experiment, there is peace in both worlds until a year later, rifts start appearing, seemingly bridging the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2. At this time, both worlds were still unaware of each other, but with more of these events happening in both worlds, a connection to the other world was made through light. Now the two worlds could communicate for the first time. It wasn't a happy meeting though. The two worlds that were split by Klaus' experiment and put into two different pocket dimensions drifted together again to be whole. The problem was that the two worlds now consisted of opposing matter. Would the two worlds collide and overlap, they would erase each other from existence. To counter total annihilation, both worlds of Alrest and Bionis started developing a machine that would be unaffected by the collision. Origin would record every single person and location in a database to basically recreate the worlds from the start after everything was erased. How Origin works is of course left unexplained to us, and I don't even think I could comprehend what the machine is actually doing with souls and stuff, but basically Bionis had Shulk and others build half of Origin based on Ontos' blueprints. Remember, the Trinity coprocessor is a super advanced AI dealing with managing a multi-dimensional gate, so the concept of Origin isn't out of the norm. In Alrest, we know that Tora and others were involved in creating the other half of Origin. With Pyra and Mithra being Numa on our side, it should also not be a problem to comprehend the creation of Origin. Now this is the important stuff that happens in Xenoblade 3, where many people still have many questions. Before the two worlds could completely overlap and erase each other, the flow of time was stopped by Z. Z is a byproduct of Origin. The people's souls recorded in Origin feared the future. Their overwhelming fear and prayers that time would stop created Z, giving him form. So what Z did is stop the flow of time before everything was erased, leaving only Aionios. This meant that not everything and everyone was erased, and because of that, Origin did not start initiating the reconstruction of both worlds. That also meant that some people like Rex, Shulk, Panacea, Linka, Riku and even Melia and Nia never died and went to Origin. As far as we know, Mythra and Pyra did not survive this phase and went back to the core crystal, as we will see later. To maintain his power, Zed needed a cycle of life and death to continue the Endless Now, so he took Melia, who he needed to access the data from Origin, and created together with X and Y the Flame Clock system and the endless rebirths we know from the Xenoblade 3 main game. Meanwhile, Rex and Shulk with the rest of the Liberators fought against Zed to free the world from him for unknown years. We know this because in the meantime, Noah and Mio had a lot of rebirths also trying to fight against Zed but failing. Until one day they stopped fighting and had a child that we now know is Gondor, the Old One. Gondor is the first instance of a soul being born that was not recorded in Origin. He later created the first city and had many descendants. See, I don't actually know if every single city resident is a descendant of Gondor, but I don't believe that would be possible, even though N kinda remarks that they were all born from him, so who knows. So after all the years of Noah's incarnations, and after Gondor established the city and had many descendants, Alpha appeared. Alpha is Ontos personified, but not Alvis anymore either. Rex and A explain that Ontos without Numa and Logos around has turned back into an unbiased information processing unit, meaning he lost his conscience. His goal now is to ensure the future of humanity by saving the people of the city and safeguard them to a new world. For that, the frozen in time Ionios and every old soul has to disappear so that time can flow once again. Remember, if time continues to flow, everyone will be erased and the old souls recorded in Origin will be recreated, but the new life not recorded in Origin will not be reborn. So Alpha's conclusion is that the new life deserves to live while the old life lived their life already and has to make room for the new life now. This is an amazing contrast to what our main goal in the main game is, as well as what Rex and Shulk were trying to do. Remember that what we basically did at the end of Xenoblade 3 is exactly that. We restarted Origin and every person not recorded in Origin basically died forever, including Monica and Gondor. Their explanation was that the chance of being born once again in this new world was sufficient enough for them. Kinda depressing when you think about it. And on the other side we have Mobius, who basically want none of this to happen. If they remain in the Endless Now, no one has to die. All different solutions with no answer really being the correct one. That's what Noah also said at the ending of Xenoblade 3, but I kinda jumped way ahead there. Let's go back into what actually happens now in Future Redeemed. Alpha appears with the goal to erase everyone except the new life from the city. Rex, Shulk and Zed formed a temporary alliance to stop Alpha. They managed to defeat him and put him back into the core crystal. Although Rex and Shulk lost an eye and a limb. They knew he would return though because they couldn't kill him. That's why the treaty alliance with Zed to not interfere still held up 15 years later. And after 15 years, Ontos managed to find a new host for his return when Nail picked up his core crystal. During this time, Zed noticed Noah returned to the rebirth system even though he managed to make it past his homecoming and made him Mobius N. As you might know, when people make it to their homecoming, they do not return into Zed's endless cycle, but Noah and Mio are an exception. We do not know the answer as to why they surpassed the system of Ionios. We see Child Noah still move in frozen time at the beginning of Xenoblade 3 when the worlds are about to collide, so my theory is that it has something to do with this. In any case, this might also explain why Noah was still reborn even after becoming N. Back to the current events. Zed gave Noah the choice to stay in the Endless Now with Mio, but in return he has to fight for Zed and defeat Alpha. To ensure that Alpha's power does not grow and he leaves to a new world, N needs to erase lives from the city. But he did not wish to cut down Gondor, his son, as we now know. So Alpha gained control over Nael to amplify his power and started taking the remaining city residents into his ark to depart to a new world, but thanks to N, he couldn't fulfill his mission and got set back once again. During this interaction, Gondor jumps onto Alpha, unchaining his conscience from Ontos' shackles, basically splitting him into two. A is now the second half of Alpha and all his conscious. You can imagine it like how Numa split into Pyra and Mithra at the end of Xenoblade 2, but because Ontos is somewhere in between male and female, he split into a male and a female persona. I think now is a good time to address the Ouroboros powers and Numa's core crystal, because Gondor's powers managed to split Alpha in two. We know he has been studying the Ouroboros powers, and he was also in possession of Numa's core crystal that he gifted to Matthew later. Well, let's address the Ouroboros powers first. We know Nia made the Ouroboros stone through a process of catalysis between Origin and her core crystal, but that doesn't tell us much. We know the powers of Ouroboros are super limited at the beginning. The only purpose was to summon your inner Ouroboros to help in the fight. At that time, more than just 6 people could have this power. Even Rex and Shulk had that power unlocked. But now with Matthew, we saw that his gauntlets alone could transfer the Ouroboros powers to anyone. And now we know why. Numa's core crystal was in the gauntlets all along. The Ouroboros powers were thanks to their energy. And after touching and Sword of the End, the full power of Ouroboros was awakened, letting them combine into one being, and then later giving 6 people the powers to fuse with other Ouroboros. Now this is a theory because this is actually not explained but heavily hinted at during Future Redeemed. Does Logos reside within End's Sword of the End? The short answer is maybe. I would have liked to get a more concrete answer, but we didn't. As to how this is possible, it isn't actually too far-fetched to believe it could happen. The Trinity core processor literally had the world's data stored, including other Blades data, and with Origin storing in recreation shenanigans, it could have actually revived Logos core crystal maybe. But enough speculation. This is when the main game of Future Redeemed starts playing. Matthew witnesses End's attack on the city, and Gondor sacrifices himself to split Alpha in two. Then A finds Matthew and they both start looking for city survivors. They meet Glimmer, who is Rex's and Pyra's child, as well as Schultz and Fiora's child Nicole, that died during the world's collision and were put into the flame clock cycle by Zed. People who were put into Zed's cycle don't remember anything about the worlds before the collision. They are grown in a pot until they become 10 years old and then designated to a colony. Agnes if they were from Alrest, and Kevis if they were from Bionis. They all get a 10-year lifespan to fight for their faction, and at this point in time, their homecoming means they are getting beheaded before their time runs out so that they can return to the cycle. This will only change later when Chris introduces the Off-Seeing, and with the help of M, the real homecoming with Off-Seers will become the standard. Anyways, Matthew and A free them from the flame clock system and give them the Ouroboros powers. Then they meet with Rex and Shulk, who both recognize their kids but are put in a really awkward spot. The kids don't remember them or the time before their rebirth at all. They also have no idea about what parents and kids even are, like our main party in Xenoblade 3, and just bombarding the kids with the facts aren't gonna make them feel more attached to them just because of bonds, so they don't tell them about it. We get concrete confirmation that Linka is Zeke and Pandoria's kid. She also remembers the world before Alrest, so we can confirm that she survived the collision and doesn't age like Rex and the others. As for Panacea, it is sadly not as concretely confirmed as Linka, but she is definitely Sharla's kid and also survived the collision. Now we all know it was runtime, but I would have loved to see a confirmation. Because both characters are not on the cycle and don't age as much, it is definitely the case that they died in a fight before the main game takes place, because the other characters like Riku are still alive after all that time. Let's talk about Riku. We also see him in this DLC. Riku confirms to be the child of either Riki or Kino. He says his dad and Melia were traveling companions, so both Riki and Kino are possible. As for Riki's case, he didn't have a blue-collar child, but we know he adapted Kino and could have done the same with Riku. Kino would also make sense because his fur color is already a popping green, but I'm not a Nopon genetic professor, so who knows. Basically, he's also from the old world and never died and returned to Origin, which also doesn't age him. That's how he can still be alive during the main game of Xenoblade 3. We even saw another legendary Nopon smith in Future Redeemed named Burbur, who lives until the main game and designs the dungeon puzzles. Now that we have met the main party, we basically see exactly what happens in Future Redeemed. They help gather people from all over the region, and then on the search for Niall they run into Alpha in Niall's body. Alpha still needs Matthew to embark on the new world, so he came to fetch him. But it didn't work out for Alpha once again, and joined the fight again and pushed Alpha back. Damaged once again, Alpha retreats to Origin where he will await them for the final fight. On the way to Prison Island, we confront N one final time before Alpha appears and sends them into Origin. What we see here is Klaus's world, the original Earth before the experiment. This is of course possible because Origin can recreate memory space, and the only one remaining who saw Klaus's world before the experiment is Alpha. This is where we get crazy lore dumps that most people miss because the radio actually mentions both Xeno's saga and specific Xenoblade X events. I won't go into detail here, but my Xenoblade X video goes into way more details if you are interested. So Alpha transforms into this mechanical angel looking thing, and with the power of friendship and especially with the power of Numa's core crystal, which was all this time in Matthew's gauntlet, and seemingly Logos' power in N's Sword of the End, now combined, we awaken the true Ouroboros power and fuse into one giant Ouroboros to beat Alpha for good. Rex and Shulk give their lifespans to Glimmer and Nico so they can live past their 10-year lifespan, and now with Alpha gone, Origin needs avatars / admins to fully operate again. It isn't well explained, but it has probably something to do with the Trinity core processor needing 3 avatars to function properly. In Future Redeemed, Shulk and Rex take the roles of the avatars to keep Origin running, and we know that Z used X and Y to seize Origin as well. After this, we see the Colony 9 survivors flee to a new area that looks like it could be Swordmarch, where they will build the second city. Riku and Nicole were working on the Ouroboros stone that we will get in the main game later that allows the party of 6 to transform into Ouroboros fusions. And Matthew leaves the survivors to find a new place and new people. We know from the statue that he will actually never return to the second city, but he will have offspring that join the city many years later. And talking about the city, these here are the founders of the second city of course. Matthew, Niall, Nicole, Glimmer, Panacea, Linka, and of course the 7th hidden founder was Riku all along. He didn't want to be mentioned in records because he had another plan. He wanted to infiltrate a Kalvesi colony and find the person he can trust Lucky 7 with. And that's what he did. So basically, after the ending of Future Redeemed, the founders built the second city, which is a massive Voronezh, and hid themselves on Morbius in Mechonis' sword hilt. Glimmer and Nicole made it past 80 years before dying, and as I said, Linka and Panacea probably died during a fight. Their legacy and will would be passed on to their descendants. It was somewhere during this time that Chris and Em would finally create the homecoming ceremony with Offseers. During this time, Chris was not Morbius yet and wouldn't become until way later. This took place 1000 years before the main game. So after 1000 years of waiting, it is time for the main game to take place. I'm definitely not going to cover the entire main story here. We have all played this game if you reach this point in the video, hopefully. Basically, Riku gives Noah the Lucky 7 and our main party finally fights and frees Origin out of Zed's control. After we beat Zed, we are in Origin's memory space once again, where Noah reflects if his decision really is the correct choice, but Monica and Gonda reassure him that they are content with hopefully being reborn in this new world, which in my opinion is very unlikely if you consider all the circumstances that led to their births, but who knows. Now with Zed gone, the worlds are about to return to their previous state. At the ending of Future Redeemed, we see that the 2 different Earths, Alrest and Bionis respectively, that were each in their respective pocket dimension, start to split apart again and return to the real universe they belonged in before Klaus pressed the button. This is why our main party splits apart in the very emotional ending scene. Then we see both worlds fusing, which would erase them, and then Origin boots up the recreation process, forming one single combined planet. The restart put everything back to the second before the worlds combined and Zed stopped the time. This means everything is put back into place like nothing ever happened. all the characters are back alive and seemingly lost all their memories of what happened during the time in Ionios. For them, it's like nothing ever happened. But as Xenoblade 3 already taught us, memories are something deep ingrained within our soul, and people slowly started remembering stuff. So I don't think the memories of Ionios are lost forever, and Noah here seemingly does remember the flute song. Now with the combined worlds and back to our Milky Way, the game leaves us with 3 final unanswered questions. First, does Noah ever get to meet Mio, which of course is very possible in this combined world? Second, during the ending of Xenoblade 3, we actually see Noah disappear after birds fly by. Is this a metaphor, or did he actually magically disappear? We do not know. And where would he have gone to? And last but not least, Future Redeemed leaves us with a final teaser for the future. Something is flying towards Earth. I am 100% confident we know who this is, and Takahashi made it clear that Xenoblade is connected to the Xenosaga games now. I will leave it at that. And that's the timeline of events for Xenoblade 3 and Xenoblade as a whole. This video transformed into something way bigger than I imagined, and I didn't even fully cover the main game's events, but I hope I did clear up the exact timeline of events for all of you. And thanks again so much for watching, and if you enjoyed anything I had to say, stay tuned for way more Xenoblade content in the future. And of course, leave a like. Do it for Nia. See you.